This is the Chapter 3 Stigma podcast. This podcast was created to be there for any individual who feels like they are at a low point in life and are confused, seemingly alone, and helpless in their situation. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I felt this way too, until I sat across the table from another addict who shared his story and made me realize that I was not alone in my struggles. My life was saved by this realization, and I hope to help anyone struggling by sharing my story to show you that you are not alone and that life can contain unbelievable riches and meaning. Welcome. I am glad you are here. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Chapter 3 Stigma podcast. In today's episode, we are going to be completing the pillars of recovery topic by addressing the final pillar, and that is spiritual fitness. And really, this pillar in particular has been the most important pillar for me and for sustaining and maintaining my ability to stay on the path of active recovery, despite everything that we've been through as a family, really over the last year. And I genuinely believe, because of my focus and my change and improvement with regards to this pillar of spiritual fitness, I can genuinely say to you that throughout everything that my family has been through in the last few months, with the loss of our daughter, going through all the hardships associated with the time leading up to her birth, I never once, not once, had a craving for alcohol. And this is after years of not being able to go more than 2 weeks without a drink of some sort. And this really at its core, again, is the reason that I just believe very strongly in this framework of the pillars. I am going to state something up front here that honestly I'm a little nervous might cause people to shut the podcast off, because again, my intention with this series and with this whole project and podcast is that I want to meet the addict and the alcoholic, those struggling in life at their lowest point. Whenever I do this, I am speaking to or reflecting back on myself, in my worst and my lowest situation, and I'm trying more or less just to talk to myself. And quite frankly, what I'm about to say, I don't know how myself in that previous situation would react to this, but my plead to you as a listener is give this entire episode a listen, even after hearing what I'm about to say. So, here it is. Alcoholism and addiction are a spiritual malady. At its core, if you cannot accept this, and if you cannot work to change your situation in this regard, you will not be able to live your best life in recovery. I, again, never would have believed that before entering into active recovery and before having my own spiritual awakening, and for living through a situation that would have crumbled me in the past. And in reflecting back on it, I asked why I was able to sustain, and I truly believe it is because I focused on my spiritual fitness during all of this. So to start in, like the other aspects and pillars of recovery and the physical and emotional fitness. Really starting with, how do you measure your spiritual fitness? For me, and for my situation, and apologize ahead of time for the language use, but there's really no other way to portray this. My level of spiritual fitness can be measured by the amount of times that I'm saying fuck it and it just doesn't matter. When I was struggling with alcoholism, I would have the case of the fuck it's, where it's just like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. So I'm just going to revert to alcohol, because that is what numbs things. That's what soothes, the pains, the emotions that I'm feeling, and just fuck it all. And, during benders and like periods where I was really struggling, when I was engaging with my wife and talking with her, like one thing I often said was, as she was just trying to piece together what's going on and how she can help, and I would just find myself in a state of stupor and just saying, it doesn't matter, nothing matters. Despite everything we've been through in the past few months, that thought pattern has not crossed my head or crossed my mind once. So another measure of your spiritual fitness is, how capable are you of accepting aspects of your life that are truly out of your control? Do you struggle relenting that control, or are you capable of accepting things as they are and moving forward? One key point here is, acceptance doesn't mean that the situation doesn't suck. Like, there isn't a huge aspect to my daughter's story and my daughter's life that is completely out of our control, and we just have to accept. That doesn't mean that it's easy. It's extremely difficult for us right now, but we have to accept that we didn't control her genetic makeup, and we didn't control the way that manifested and cause her body to struggle. Another measure of spiritual fitness is, when you are in moments of suffering, are you capable of noticing and finding gratitude and beauty despite those moments of suffering? This is something that played out really apparently and obviously to me when I was witnessing Lucy becoming stabilized in the NICU. I walked from the delivery room where Lucy was born to the NICU with her and the NICU transfer team. And I was positioned outside of her NICU room, and there were anywhere from 6 to 8 doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists that were all working incredibly hard, incredibly efficiently, and just in this manner that I was sitting there and watching them and finding myself going, this is incredible. This is unbelievable that we have figured these processes out, these methods for stabilizing a infant human being in such critical condition. And despite all of the emotions and the weight of the situation that was going on, I just found myself so grateful, not only for the 6 to 8 individuals that were in the room doing the actual work on Lucy, but I started extrapolating and thinking about like this nurse or this doctor that I'm never going to know, but who spent years obsessing over perfecting this aspect or this process that is now, like one of 27 things that is being done to Lucy to stabilize her. And as I was thinking about that and just like extrapolating it based on the number of procedures that were being run rapidly, and again, just seeing the hands at work, it's like, God, there's thousands, if not tens of thousands, people involved with the care and the stabilization of Lucy right now. And so that ability to just find gratitude and beauty in this like really intense moment of suffering was just a major eye opener for me with regards to like where I had come to a point at with regards to my spiritual fitness. And then finally, another measure, and really what I have right now as a final measure of spiritual fitness is, do you have moments in your life, like very specific moments, where you experienced that egoless sensation where it doesn't have to be like an extreme circumstance, but my instance in my case was August 8th when we found out about Lucy's health concerns, and having that brief moment where when the doctor first said he was seeing something concerning, my mind first said, this is what you deserve, Kyle. This is the payback for all those years of lying, of hiding, of being an alcoholic and not being the man that you should be. And my spiritual awakening was, as soon as those thoughts appeared in my mind, they instantly got replaced with this resounding and uplifting sensation of, no, that's not right. And instead, I replaced those thoughts with, this little girl was always part of my life and always part of my plan. And God knew that the only way to prepare me was to give me my battle and my struggle with alcoholism, because I saw how far I could take things as an individual, and I encountered moments where I needed to depend on others and where I needed to depend on God and trust God. And that moment in the hospital or in the doctor's office when we found out about Lucy, to me, was like, I kind of joke about it, but it's like, I think God got tired of me just like asking a bunch of questions, and he finally goes, all right, if you'll just shut up and accept things from now on, I'll show you. And he kind of pulled the curtain back, and he goes, see, it's all part of a plan. I've got this. Now go back to living life. And to me, that is the distinct moment where everything changed for me from a spiritual perspective. And just to paint the picture, like, this does not have to be an extreme event or an extreme circumstance that leads to it. To give you an example, like, I don't want to share too much information, but my sponsor in AA, he's a stated atheist, yet he had a spiritual awakening himself while he was doing the dishes. And just in talking with him and working with him, like, as odd as it may seem, like, these two situations for us, they match, and they map in a lot of aspects with regards to like this loss of self, this egolessness, and this understanding that like there is a plan, and you kind of just have to commit yourself and turn yourself over in that regard. So again, those are the measures of spirituality. I just want to paint a quick picture of my life and how really like spirituality has played out in my story. Honestly, I think a lot of people are going to resonate with this for the most part. I should say, at least, I know a lot of my friends have followed a seemingly similar pattern. But I was raised, upper Midwest Protestant, like going to church every week. And really, when I left and went off to college, I would blatantly say like I was a hard atheist. I felt I was smarter than it all. Everything was so obvious to me that there were fundamental laws that would really one day explain everything. And, all these unknowns are just like knowledge gaps that are just waiting to be discovered. And eventually, like, God, the concept of God is going to shrivel into like this dark corner of the room because, our human capacity for knowledge has just shown so much light that there's nowhere else for God to go. And like crudely stating it, it's like, well, I didn't believe in the Easter Bunny or Santa, and to me, like God was no different. And just given my life experience at this point, like I'm quite embarrassed saying that right now. Like it's such a weak analogy, and anyway, so that was, call it like 18 to 22, 23 years old. And then I would say in my early 20s, I would classify myself more as agnostic, where it's like I chilled out a bit. I started actually kind of thinking and accepting that, man, there really are some significant knowledge gaps in the human like experience and just the world around us that like it really doesn't seem like we can explain. But I have always just had an issue with like infighting within groups. And I looked at the religious landscape and I really saw a lot of the same. It's like, gosh, like it's isn't it awkward that like all of these different religions are actually like calling the same God, yet they are fighting over like particulars. Like it didn't seem like a situation that I really wanted to engage in. But like honestly, I was forming the opinion like I didn't really care, like don't bother me, I won't bother you, sort of mentality. Then I would say kind of mid and venturing into my late 20s, I started truly classifying myself as a spiritual person. And really, in particular, like I felt and claimed that sense of spirituality when I was outdoors, specifically out west, Western United States in mountainous regions. Just for whatever reason, I really felt a connection to some sort of higher power, but I couldn't explain it, and I also couldn't sustain it. I would have these experiences out in the mountains, and then days after being back home, that connection and that strength and that spirituality would wither. Then, of course, I entered into my own self-created hell, and I was completely lost. I had zero sense of meaning. I was clawing for that little grasp of spirituality that I had felt kind of in my late 20s. And I mean, I would venture out into the mountains specifically looking for that reconnection, and I would get it in bits and pieces, but the sustainment of it was going away even faster than it had before. And there were even some moments out in the mountains where I'm just like, why am I here? Like the sole purpose for me being here is to feel this connection to some higher power, and I'm just lost. I'm just not feeling it and not connecting. And I just really had this profound like disbelief that any all-powerful, loving God would allow there to be so much suffering in this world. And I wasn't even looking at all the issues that we have, in our everyday life as like a species, as a country, whatever. I was specifically talking about my personal experience. It's like, how could there be so much self-hate, so much suffering, and there be a God? So then I entered rehab, and I walked into rehab again with the intention that I was going to buy into everything that they did. And upon reflection back, there was a caveat to that. I was not going to buy into AA, and I was not going to buy into the higher power and God conversation. That wasn't intentional. I think it truly just came from the 2 to 3 years of complete hell that I had put myself through. And I was just kind of like not ready for it at the time, and I didn't even really realize it. But, lucky for me, within a week or so of being in rehab, I realized that I was not bought in to AA in their concept of a higher power or God. And so before we went to a meeting that evening, I committed and decided that I was going to give it a chance that night. And it just so happens the topic of conversation at the meeting was about one's higher power and the connection and concept there. And there was an older gentleman. I'll never know his name. I'll probably never see him again. He raised his hand for a share, and all he said quite plainly was, "I do not want a God that I can understand." That was it. He passed after that. The meeting continued on, and my mind just stuck to that statement. I could not let it go. Through the evening there and into the next day, I just kept replaying back, "I do not want a God I can understand." And I started asking myself a few more questions stemming from that statement. The first was, who am I to say there is no God? I'm in freaking rehab. Obviously, I have issues that I'm incapable of handling right now. And hearkening back to my, college days where I was so smart, it's like, obviously, I'm not smart enough to have this figured out myself. So really, who am I to say that there is no God? Secondly, I started thinking, why would I want a God whose power and influence could be understood by humanity? Like, isn't the entire point of being like a higher power the fact that like we can't understand it, like we can't comprehend it? And in a way I've thought about that is like, in my time, I guess, in the realm of like being engineering and science focused, like one concept that I've noticed that humans like just genuinely can't grasp is time. Like time is just this concept that is just difficult to understand. Like the idea of 1 billion years is like, how do you even fathom that as a human being where we only live, say, 70 or 80? And so like the fact that there's like this measurable aspect to existence that humanity can't really grasp, to me started opening the door up to like, there's probably a lot more out there that is just like impossible for us to understand. And so I finally allowed, that concept to, and that possibility to be opened up in my mind. But I still came back to this idea or question or concern about, why would a loving God create a world with so much suffering? And this one took me into the days of dealing with Lucy's illness and with Lucy's passing to really address, think about, and come to the conclusion that I'm at today. And in response to that now, I say, what if the point of life is not happiness, but the point of life is finding joy, peace, love, and meaning in the face of suffering? Those are the moments that stand out to me the most during Lucy's time here on earth is when, despite all the incredible weight and all the incredible suffering that was coming down on us, just having these moments where you're just incredibly joyful and grateful, and you just feel love and support. And it's like, maybe that's the point. And this idea that life is supposed to be easy and prosperous and, just full of meaning constantly, like that's the wrong game to be playing. And instead, like, I've started looking at things where it's like, assume suffering and assume hardship, and then like your best self is finding, I guess, happiness or joy and fulfillment within that realm of suffering and hardship. So to me, like, this transformation has really taken place like in very distinct moments. Like I said, that morning in the doctor's office on August 8th when we found out about Lucy, but also just through the continued questioning and reflecting back on why during all of this I never felt angry at God or angry at the world or felt like lashing out or felt cheated. Instead, I was able to navigate these waters of intense grief and loss without once feeling a why me, or how can the world be so full of evil, or how can the world be so full of suffering. At this point, I trust God, and I trust that He has a plan. Now, having said that, like, I'm gonna dive into some maybe like caveats or like address some things that I've in the past had troubles with that I think I've clarified now for myself. So while I like fully trust God and trust that there is a plan, that doesn't mean that I won't put forth significant personal effort, especially in areas that I can control. So it's like, there's a saying, it's like, I pray and trust God, but I'm still going to row the boat to the shore. And I found and I find that it is helpful for me when I do take a moment to pray. I'm very, very explicit about my own personal selfish desires that are a part of that ask, but then I ask for the ability to accept whatever God's plan might be in that situation. So the best example that I have for that is every single week, every single time Alyssa and I were going to the doctor to get an ultrasound done of Lucy, we would, actually, I don't know if this point has been made, but like the doctors had prepared us that anytime Lucy got put on the ultrasound, there's a high likelihood we were not going to have a heartbeat. So like going into the doctors each time, we did not know if our little girl was going to be alive anymore. And so Alyssa and I would pull into the parking lot, we'd park, sit together, hold hands, and we would say a prayer. And I would always start the prayer with, we selfishly hope that Lucy has a heartbeat today and that she's growing and that she's developing. But we also ask for the strength to persevere through whatever plan that you may have. That kind of concept, with regards to prayer, I continue to go back to, because like I'm an alcoholic and I'm a human being. I am selfish. That is something that I am not like going to change overnight, but I think I've found it very helpful to identify like, this is my human driven, selfish ask for you, God. But if that's not part of the plan, like, I just hope I have the strength and capability of accepting whatever it is that is part of your plan. I think that's a problem that people have. It's like, well, why would you why would you even bother praying? Like, there's billions of people on this earth. Like, why does God care for you? Like, one, I think that's getting into the realm of like, it's just kind of shit we don't know. And like, that's kind of the purpose of what I was talking about earlier. Like, it's beyond the capacity of human understanding, first of all. And secondly, I keep thinking about it. It's like, no, I think you're right. Like, maybe God isn't going to listen to your prayer about a direct change to your situation in the moment. But like over the course of time, I have just witnessed and experienced that it's like things work out. Things are part of a plan. So where that has gotten me is I have really found the ability to turn over control of aspects to my life to Him and really stop worrying about them and stop trying to control them so much. And so to get into some tactics as we wrap up here for improving your spiritual fitness, I would think first and foremost, like, go back to those questions that I talked about earlier. Those were huge for me. And they are this again: who am I to say there is no God? Second, why would I want a God whose power could be understood by humanity? And then third, the statement, again, that really changed everything for me: I do not want a God that I can understand. So I would just say, think on those, reflect on them, and come back to them. Secondly, tactically speaking, go ahead and pause for prayer. And maybe it's meditation that helps you out, or for us, we do it at dinner time. Our son says nightly prayers, and I found that exercise causes me to pause and say prayers more often. And I think prayers are especially powerful in the situations that are most difficult, and finding gratitude to express in those moments just kind of strengthens your resolve and strengthens your faith and spirituality. Third, I would say actually learn the Serenity Prayer. I think there's incredible power in the Serenity Prayer. I am not a person that can memorize verses or lines, so this has taken me a while. But for those who don't know, the Serenity Prayer is: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Another tactic is make a decision to witness miracles in life. Miracles are all around us, and we have come to a point in our civilization and our technology advancement of innovation and things like that we take miracles for granted. There are just an overwhelming amount of miracles that happen each and every day. And I think part of our problem is we tune them out. And so choose to tune in and witness those miracles that happen in life. Finally, I would say find a community, big or small, that has shared values that you can discuss faith and spirituality with in confidence, and talk about it. Challenge your perception of faith, challenge your belief system. And I would say ultimately, don't be afraid to learn and evolve as a believer. I think one of the problems I had with religion in particular was it seemed really static to me. It seemed like a group of people that were not willing to change and adjust. And so I kind of separate myself from that idea, and I really allow for learning and evolution as a believer to take part, because without it, I'd probably be stuck, in my more so atheist mindset. I do have a few notes in closing here, and it is in particular to the idea of religion versus spirituality. I go to a church. I like the church that we go to. However, I do want to address I think the absolute worst aspects of spirituality is the human component of it. I think given the recent and actually fairly long standing history, I think leaders and church heads have done an incredibly great disservice to God and every single person that they claim to serve. I myself was pushed away from belief because I witness incredible flaws in human beings. Right now, though, I only worry about myself. And it is a detriment to myself to not feel a connection with God, to not believe. So I believe, despite the oftentimes grotesqueness of human behavior within the religious realm. So I absolutely do not support the immoral behavior that occurs, specifically with leaders and heads of churches. I think they should be challenged. I think they should be exposed. But I refuse to lose my personal relationship with God because narcissists and terrible human beings have manipulated their way into a place of authority within the church. And that's not a statement about every church leader, obviously, but it's the grotesque ones that turn people away. So again, I refuse to throw out my relationship with God because another individual is flawed. So I'm gonna officially close. I think I've said that twice now, with just kind of a summary and a note about how all of these pillars play into advancement of well-being, but also specific to addiction and staying on the path of recovery. A little bit of a note on relapse, because I think this has been a really enlightening discovery by myself and others as we've kind of thought this one through. So these pillars, physical, emotional, and spiritual, they're not only a way to measure and practice progression towards a meaningful life, it's also a critical way of monitoring your risk of relapse. So people think about relapse in terms of your chemical of choice, your drug of choice entering your system. That's the physical aspect of the relapse. That's the one everyone talks about. That's the one everyone notices because you show up somewhere drunk or something like that. The very, very key and incredibly interesting thing about these pillars, though, is spiritual relapse always occur first. Spiritual relapse happens first, then you take an emotional hit and you have an emotional relapse, and finally the physical relapse happens. And so what I mean by that is a spiritual relapse for me would be finding myself saying, it just doesn't matter. Nothing matters. If I find myself in that situation and my wife and I are monitoring my beliefs and like the words I'm saying very, very closely, because dipping into that mindset again is a sign that there's a spiritual relapse occurring. Once the spiritual fitness and once the spiritual pillar has fallen, it's only a matter of time before the other two fall and a physical relapse happens. So by monitoring and catching your spiritual or emotional relapse up front, an addict can avoid the physical relapse before it ever occurs. And the thing about it is the time period between a spiritual and a physical relapse can be anywhere from seconds or minutes to months. Like someone could have relapsed spiritually last year and they've just been having life hammered down on them through today, when today they just go, you know what, it's just not worth it anymore. I'm going back to the drink, or I'm going back to my drug of choice. So I've really enjoyed bringing the concept of these pillars of recovery and I guess like overall well-being to you guys. Again, this is all a work in progress, and Like these are just concepts and thoughts that I've had, and I really enjoy like refining and sharpening the concepts, the arguments, the the words, the clarification around all of it, because it really is seeming to have an impact, and it's a different mindset, and it's a much healthier and more effective way to think about your overall well-being than just like, oh, do I have good physical and mental health? It's like, no, think about your overall well-being in terms of physical, emotional, and spiritual fitness. And I think we can, I should only speak to myself. Like I've thought about my life in those aspects, and I have taken my life to a place that I truly never thought was ever possible. And I am much more of a man, much more of a human being than I ever could have imagined. So that is going to be it for this Pillars of Recovery series. We've got an exciting month of podcasts coming up where we are going to dive into specific elements from my recovery journey. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So obviously, like I don't necessarily agree with that verbiage or that language or mindset. However, we're going to take advantage of it and do a really big promotional push with Chapter 3 Stigma. And we're going to center it around the elements of recovery, how really during my time in rehab, I set myself up to maintain and stay on the road of active recovery. So just as a little bit of a teaser, those elements are going to be movement, gratitude and awe, vision, spiritual connection, and community. So I'm very excited to bring that to you all. And that's all I've got for today. Take care. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others or give us a rating on your channel of choice. My hope is that my story can help others in their struggles with addiction or any other aspects of life that they feel could be bettered. You can follow us on social media at Chapter 3 Stigma on Instagram and YouTube. I cannot solve your problems for you, but I can listen. If you want to reach out with a message through one of those channels, I will respond and let you know that you are not alone. All the best, you are loved, and life is worth every struggle and bit of suffering you have to endure. Until next time,